right, welcome into the first episode of Who's Got Next, the Maize and Blue Reviews recruiting podcast. You know what? I got to drop the V. Restart it. Bring it back. Restart it. Got to drop the V. We're no longer the Maize and Blue Review, just Maize and Blue Review. Josh Henschke, Zach Libby, Brandon Justice, rivals, recruiting. We've been waiting on this podcast for a minute, boys, but we're here. People are excited. I'm excited. I know you guys are. So let's give you guys the faces behind the microphones, who you guys are listening to on the other side. I am one of your three hosts, Brandon Justice, senior editor of Maize and Blue Review. I'm joined by Josh Henschke, who is our publisher, and Zach Libby, who is our recruiting editor and kind of the expert when it comes to these things and will be our resident expert when it comes to these episodes. So we're really excited to bring you guys the show and to give you guys a weekly look into the Michigan recruiting sphere, what's going on, who we think is going where. And then as we get into the season, we'll talk about Friday Night Lights and how those games are, because Zach and I will both be out there watching games. And we'll also be doing some basketball recruiting with Davis Mosley, the Karate Kid himself, who's like taken on a whole life within us for the past month, which is crazy. I'm sure we'll touch on that. We'll be doing mailbags, and we'll start with one this week. But let's get things started with what everyone's really come here to talk about, fellas, and that is the barbecue at the Big House. It was a huge ordeal for Michigan every year. It's their recruiting cookout. I mean, every single school, every program has something similar to this. They just have different variations of it and different names. And ever since Jim Harbaugh's come back to Michigan, it's been the barbecue at the Big House, and it's been a pretty resounding success overall. Now, we know Michigan's recruiting over the past few months has not had the, I guess, highest of reviews. So, Zach, I will let you take us through the barbecue at the Big House, what led up to the barbecue at the Big House, and then the aftermath of it.
So this barbecue was obviously important given the timing. It's the first big event after the dead period. And just harking on what you said, I mean, we've heard, as, leaders of this website and the others on this site can attest to it, of just the criticism that we've heard throughout these months of, Michigan falling behind when it comes to reeling in success in this 23 recruiting class after obviously winning the Big Ten title and going to the college football playoff. Criticism can be warranted. They're number 35 right now after a commitment that was just made today that we'll definitely be talking about. But number 35 just isn't acceptable for a program like this, and fans have definitely voiced their concern about that. So this barbecue was essentially a way to, I guess, draw out the negativity that has been played, especially in the spring and summer. I was able to, do a quick takeaways overnight last night. There was about 8 things that I considered, but, just drawing it back to 5, there was those were the big main headlines. Obviously, the first one we got to start off with is the Providence Day crew that all went up there together. If you don't know, Providence Day is a North Carolina-based high school. His head coach is actually the father of Will Grier, former Florida quarterback, and father of Vine stars, if anyone's that old. But yeah, I learned that yesterday.
Great app. You just learned about Vine?
No, I learned about the coach being the son of those Nash and Greer or whoever those guys were. But yeah. If you're not over 25, then you don't understand. But
you don't get it yet.
No, these Providence Day guys, we'll name them all in unison. 5-star quarterback out of the 24 class, Jaden Davis, 2024 Michigan legacy and son of Jonathan Goodwin, Super Bowl champion, member of the 90s teams. Channing Goodwin, Rivals 250 4-star wide receiver in the 24 class, Jordan Shipp, and 23 cornerback 3-star Chris Peel. Now, Peel was the only one of the 3 who visited for the first time. The rest of the 3 actually went out to Ann Arbor earlier in June for the first time. It's going to be cliche to say, but Michigan definitely rolled out the red carpet for all 4. All 4 are high-profile prospects. heavy targets. That's just, as a collective unit. I say that because um, we have talked to Jordan and Channing on a good number of times, and they have all mentioned the possibility of them wanting to team up together at the next level. And since all four have offers and reported interest at a highest level, that Michigan could be a destination. Um, going to Davis alone, obviously, is the med headliner. He was the main headliner, number 5 player in the 24 class, number 3 quarterback, which is arguable. But even if he had travel alone, it still would have been a win, given how much stock Michigan is putting in, how much stock is being put in for him by the staff. Um, Peel could return in September for a September official. So that's one to look out for. Channing, good win. Obviously, like I said, has connections. He and Davis have future casts put in by the MNBR staff. So that's something to look out for. And then obviously, Ship's overwhelming quotes about remaining teammates remains to be seen. Should the dice roll right? So, no, we've heard nothing but great things about that visit on Sunday from sources. It was everything that Michigan could have hoped for in terms of getting a lead, especially on Davis with Georgia and Clemson heavily aggressively pushing for him. So no, it was a good stepping point for what could be a commitment. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe next year. Who knows? I'm just going to go roll through the remaining 4. Buford High had two members of the Rivals 250 come up for the first time. KJ Bolden, King Joseph Everts, great name, great talent. Both were very excited about coming up after interviewing them earlier last week, and both were very active on social media during the day, posting photos with Harbaugh and expressing their love for the campus and everything. The next one was just no announced commitments for Sunday on the day of Sunday. Obviously, that changed with Evan Link, the 3-star offensive tackle, committing earlier today, which would be a Monday. Unexpected. We learned, Josh and I learned that he made a unexpected and unannounced visit to campus, which he's been a high target ever since Michigan missed out on so many offensive tackles this summer, like Charles Yagusa and Kane Proctor. So great addition to the class for Sharon Moore to pair alongside Amir Herring. When we were talking about other commitments that might be in the conversations, you got to look at a guy like Caleb Lemieux out of Arizona, who's also a heavy offensive line target that Moore's pursuing. Jair Hill out of Chicagoland. He is one that's shown heavy interest in Michigan, Illinois, and some of the southern schools are now in the mix for him. So that'll be interesting to see. The next one is only 2 offers were issued out. Now, I told Josh this during the day when I was posting the thread, which you can see on our forum if you sign up for the free trial that's being promoted right now. Only 2 offers, like I said, were issued out, despite the fact that so many high 3-star and 4-stars were also on campus that didn't have an offer. Those 2 were San Diego 3-star tight end Zach Marshall, and 2024 Florida 3-star offensive tackle Jake Guarnera. Marshall is the number 53 overall prospect in the state of California, whose other offers are Arizona, Utah, and Washington State. Guarnera is the number 34 tackle in the country and is garnering close attention from Florida, Rutgers, Florida State, Penn State, and NC State. If you see their social media posts regarding their offers, both were related when they announced the news. So Michigan certainly moved the needle as strong contenders in the early going. I mentioned this is my final key point. We only have so much time, so I want to get everything that I want to say right now. But there was one negative, but it was outside of Michigan's control. However, if you were following as closely as I did yesterday, you saw, I guess, the momentum that this barbecue carried through the early morning and early afternoon, as evident by Jay Davis's post on social media that had him and his teammates in the office of Jim Harbaugh all smiling, as well as all the commits, sharing the tapestry that the crew in the program, unselfishly set up for everyone to enjoy. But somewhere around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, Michigan State got the last laugh when Nicholas Marsh announced his commitment. Rob was one. This is why it's outside Michigan's control, because who would have thought that a 24 kid would announce his commitment at this time. It happens, but it also didn't come unexpected. Marsh was a heavy target, being that he comes from local juggernaut River Rouge, 2020 state finalist. This was a Ron Bellamy and Steve Klingsdale leading the way for Marsh, who this website has seen live and evaluated at least 4 times this offseason, and has come away so strong for his vertical ability and his route running. I don't expect this. It's a heavy blow considering that a top target in-state chose their in-state rival, but I don't expect communications to drop anytime soon with September nearing. So that is my 7-minute recap. I hope I got all the points down.
I don't think anyone is ever going to get a recap more thorough than that one. We appreciate it. Zach, who was all over the barbecue at the big house, and the thread was an all-day thing. And again, maybe not as eventful as what we thought it was going to be, or what I should say is maybe not as eventful as barbecue at the big houses in the past on the day of. I feel like Michigan sometimes wraps up kids more than once on the day of and the day after. So a little bit slower to the punch than ones in the past. But it's the momentum that they got with that group that you mentioned, including Jaden Davis and company. So, Josh, just being around recruiting as much as you've been over the past, decade or so at this point, you think about that class with Chris Partridge back in 2015, 16, 17 that he was building in New Jersey, and the footprint they had there and the amount of familiar faces they brought in then. Do you think that plays a role here with Davis, to have that circle around him that's interested in following where he goes, or are your sources telling you that Davis is independently leaning towards Michigan, and if the rest come, it's just an accessory?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think Michigan does absolutely want those other kids, Ship and Goodwin and Peel. I think those are 3 legit targets outside of Jaden Davis alone. I think, if the worst possible case scenario were to happen where, Davis goes elsewhere, if that were to happen, I still believe those 3 would be takes regardless. It's not just hey, let's grab this guy, so we can get the big fish. I think those 3 guys were talking, obviously 2 separate classes as well, but all 3 of those guys could, definitely make an impact on the field at some point in their collegiate career. I think Ship is fantastic. Goodwin can develop into a really good receiver, and I think Chris Peel is ready to come in day one and compete. I think he's that good. So, getting that North Carolina pipeline is good. I think obviously the most important thing is if you can land all 4, that'd be great. Even just finishing 75% out of those 4 guys, I think is a solid win. But obviously you got to cap it off with the big guy, 5-star Jaden Davis. I mean, you got to, no matter where this turns out, he's got to be the main guy. He's got to be the headliner. And you got to get him in the class sooner rather than later, just to have a leader of that class to kind of get it all together. I mean, because you kind of see what's happening here in 23 without, that pure quarterback leader, because, no matter what kind of personality you are as a quarterback, you're always kind of seen as the leader of the recruiting class, just like you're the leader of the offense. So I think, having a guy in place, a 5-star guy, a top 50 player, top whatever he is in 24, having him in and committed early is a big deal. And, that's not even talking about what happened with, CJ Carrs and Dante Moores of the world that happened to Michigan early this summer. So, Yeah, I don't necessarily think it's a an accessory. I definitely think those guys would be takes regardless of what happens to Davis or what happens to everyone else in that group. And I think Michigan has a shot, a really good shot, with all four of them. To be honest with you.
So let's take the attention away a little bit from that North Carolina crew, set our sights a little bit more on a general perspective of where Michigan's recruiting is at in 2023. We'll start with you, Zach. Give me one position where they need someone and they don't have anybody yet, or maybe they have some but they don't have all. And on the defensive side of the ball, who are we looking at as the top target outside of Nichols Harbor, who I know is the guy everyone wants to hear about? But give us a defensive guy at a position outside of there who Michigan is prioritizing and maybe even putting all their eggs into.
Yeah, let's start with the defensive guy. Obviously, the big name that we have to mention is Javian Toviano out of Texas, 5-star, arguably probably the best cornerback that out of Texas in quite some time. This is a Steve Klingsdale movement that has transpired very recently in this past, this summer. There was I guess, a hope that he would be in attendance for the barbecue, but unfortunately he didn't. But that has not deterred Michigan's chances moving down the road. This is going to be a home run land outside of Harbor. Even if let's say Harbor doesn't and Toviano does, it's a wash. They are just as good, if not, one could be made better than the other. No, Toviano's a lockdown defensive back, plays in the Lone Star State, so talent that he faces on a weekly basis just proves how of a competitor that he is. We recently saw him at the Future 50 Under Armour camp down in IMG Academy. Plenty of video was being taken by rivals, just showing his moxie and his poise and his just ability to command a half of the field. No, this is the equivalent of a Will Johnson. This might be even more significant given that this kid is from Texas as opposed to Grosse Pointe. So if you're looking at a guy that is a must get outside of Harbor, it's him. When you look at the offensive side of the ball in terms of positions, I mean, it's easy. I guess it's lazy to say quarterback. It's kind of it's just lazy to say quarterback and just end with it, given Dante Moore going to Oregon. Michigan has yet to offer a quarterback in the 23 class, despite interesting options. You got Austin Novosad, who I don't know where he committed, but or is going to commit, but he's going to do so in a little bit. I don't know the name off the top of my head, but Florida State just had a decommit about a couple of weeks ago. So at least, if Michigan was really vying for a quarterback, there would have been at least an effort made. There was, 2 days after Dante without an offer, it kind of seemed that Michigan wasn't prioritizing it and moving on to guys like Jay Davis, who we have said, outside of this podcast, that might be even have a higher ceiling than Dante. So, in terms, I'm going to go offensive line with this question. Amir Herring is arguably the epitome of a Michigan man. He is highly intelligent. He is highly respectful. He comes from a great family. He's going to be a future doctor. So you just know how intelligent this kid is. On the field, he's a mauler. He's, great in the run block. He plays tackle at West Bloomfield, but he's going to get moved over to the guard just based on his size. That was an important land, but, there has to be more options. And that just harks on the fact that, there's only one commit after the Joe Moore Award, which is just part of the many topics of criticism that we have heard this offseason. Having Link on board is a great get. Being able to go down to the DMV where Penn State, to name one, has really put its footing in that area, especially Washington D.C. Link is like 6'8" right now, close to 300 pounds. Um, very very much like Amir, aggressive, great footwork, has the mold in the body to for the strength and conditioning staff. Once he arrives with, Ben Herbert will have a lot of fun molding this kid into the prototypical anchor that Michigan desires. But there's, I wouldn't. The need for it is obviously known by Sharon Moore, hence the fact that he has offered multiple offensive linemen in the month of July alone. On the top of my head, I can think of 4 right now. I can think of at least 5. Um, all of them have expressed to me of their early interest, in the fact that their decision that might have been come before the offer has now completely changed because Michigan has entered the mix. I've mentioned a guy like Caleb. There's other guys like Nick Fatigue, Texas Tech commit, whose biggest offer was before Michigan was indeed the Red Raiders, but Michigan is coming in hot. Another guy is Nathan Afobe, out of the Atlanta Metroplex. He has told me that he is highly considering an official visit as early as September, which will happen, in my opinion. He was supposed to be at the barbecue, but that didn't happen either. At least I give credit to Sharon Moore for understanding that having one commit is unacceptable given how much success happened last year, and is doing everything that he can through his own recruitment style, which is very down to earth, very personable, likes to understand these guys and develop bonds that goes beyond the game of football. So if we're gonna shift blame to anything, I wouldn't put it on Moore, considering how much Josh and I have heard from these offensive linemen, the ones that didn't choose Michigan, of how much they respect Sharon and how much Sharon is regarded as one of the top developers at the offensive line position. So, I expect this fall I expect on December to see more additions outside of Lincoln Herring. And I think in-season official visits will be the catalyst for that to happen.
Well, we all know how Michigan closed for signing day last year with the 2022 class. I mean, the additions that they had were pretty incredible. You think about Amarian Walker and Demarius Clemens, who I know aren't offensive linemen, but you think about the additions they had on that final day, like Derek White as well, who are going to be, all 3 of those guys could be, and those are all American type of players. And between Derek White, Amarian Walker, and Clemens, right? And they weren't a part of the class at this time last year, and we were hardly talking about them as potential candidates to join this class last year. So a strong finish is integral to this class finishing out where it should finish out, coming off of its first Big Ten championship in 17 years, the Joe Moore Award for the offensive line. But you talk about quarterbacks, and Michigan seems to be in a good spot there where they can, like you said, they're not offering anyone in 2023. They really haven't made any moves on that. And it seems that's by design, because they're buying into the fact that, and I know we're in a transfer portal world, but they're buying into the fact that J.J. McCarthy's not going to go anywhere by doing that, right? Like, that's what that tells us. And I know that everything we've heard from all of our sources, especially, is that JJ is that kind of guy who isn't going to go anywhere, that truly does love Michigan, that is going to like this out. It would be a total shock if he were to go anywhere at this point, based on what we've all heard. I mean, the vindication everyone speaks with when they speak about JJ and his loyalty to Michigan it's strong and it's telling. So they obviously feel like they're in a good spot there with quarterback play. And then you see Jaden Davis being the guy thereafter who fills that gap and does it strongly if he's as good as what we think he's going to be. So with that being said, Josh, is there anything else from the barbecue or anything else this summer, I guess, as we go into fall camp and as these official visits start to – and I know official visits different now than they used to be, much like everything else in college football. I mean, everyone used to take their OVs in the fall, and that was it. But now we have the summer OVs, and some kids like Eno Weta are wrapping up before the fall just to get their official visits out of the way in the spring and summer and focus on the season when that comes. So as we head into fall camp and you think about the more traditional process of taking the OVs and coming up with your decision around signing day, which is also in December rather than February. Any guys that you're hearing about within Michigan circles that maybe they're a close second in, or they're like a fringe leader, and you see them wrapping it up with either a commitment or getting real close to that?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of guys, but first, before I do that, I got to give you some crap, Brandon. It's Derek Moore, not Derek White.
What did I say?
Derek White plays for the San Antonio Spurs.
And I love the Spurs, so that makes sense.
Wrong,
That's why
wrong
I say
sport,
that.
wrong sport, wrong league. So, it's all right. We'll let it slide because I'm sure someone would have pointed it out to you anyway if I didn't. So
Franz is probably shaking. As he should. I mean, that's his rookie mistake on my. I mean, how am I going to call myself the senior editor?
Exactly. We hold ourselves to high standards here, and we got to meet those high standards.
Accountability. So, my hands in the air. My hands in the air.
There you go. But I guess there's a couple of guys that I think Michigan is sitting well in and could gain further ground with a visit. Even just talking from the barbecue, Jair Hill visited over the weekend. He was someone who I considered, not a lock, but as close to a lock as you could get without actually openly saying it. My future cast was on Michigan for a long time, since, the winter. And I really thought he was going to end up in the class, and then things kind of seemed to, I guess, fade away a little bit. I think in-state Illinois has done a really good job recruiting him and his family. And I think the family, the selling the family point has been a real key factor for, Hill kind of fading away from Michigan a little bit. But, now that he came back over the weekend, they've had, the family and him had a really good talk with the coaching staff and kind of ironed a few things out. I don't know specifics. I'm not going to get into specifics because that's just not how we roll around here. But, there was, from my understanding and from what I was told, is that, there was some ground made up over the weekend, and, Michigan could see themselves right back in it. And, if you're talking head to head with Illinois, they're in-state school and they're close. But, I think, and if you're, making an apples to oranges comparison, I think Michigan is, the far away the better choice. But, I digress. There's one more guy on defense, the 23 class, that I think Michigan could have done a really good job with if he would have arrived, is Caden McDonald. He's a defensive tackle out of Georgia. I think Michigan sits right up there for him. I've heard talk that they think that they lead for him, but I don't necessarily. I don't know that for a fact without talking to the kid, obviously, and those in his circle. But Michigan feels really good about him. A lot of people around him feel good about him. But obviously, unfortunately, didn't make the barbecue. Was slated to come. Had some high school team stuff come up that prevented him from coming up. But I learned over the weekend that he will be visiting officially for the Hawaii game. Obviously a night game, and they're going to have multiple visitors up for that game. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. Anytime there's a night game, it's going to be a big recruiting event for Michigan. So, getting him up there for a visit is going to be big, because you can always use more beef on the defensive line. Just like it must be a line thing this year. Michigan has missed on a couple of targets, on the defensive line too. So, they could use some beef up in the middle and on the ends as well. So those are probably the two guys that come on top of my head right now. There's probably someone blatantly obvious that I'm missing at the moment, but those two guys, I think, Michigan continues to sit well in. Obviously, in Hill's case, I think they're right back in it. I'm not ready to proclaim publicly that Michigan is going to land Hill, but I think they've done a really good job of getting back into it, and they're going to be right there whenever this thing wraps up, which I don't know. So two interesting guys, two good lands if they could land them both. I think Hill is a really good a developmental guy who can play the corner or at safety. I think Klink wants him more at corner than safety, but that's a guy who can do both, and Michigan loves multi-positional guys and guys with versatility. So that's pretty much it, and obviously to go back to the quarterback talk, I still feel pretty good about Jaden Davis, and I don't unless someone really explodes onto the scene in 23 and has just, a monster senior year somewhere out in the country. I just don't see Michigan going after anyone in 23 for quarterbacks. I mean, I was told that they would, but this was kind of before, Jaden Davis really heated up. I mean, this is right around the time he was probably offered when I was told that they wanted to take a quarterback no matter what in 23. But now that this Jaden Davis talk is hot and heavy and really getting into the tail end of stuff, I don't think that is much of a priority. As you mentioned, Cade and JJ, JJ is going to be there next year, barring anything crazy and unforeseen. And Davis Warren is a really good quarterback who's not on scholarship. I think he would be a scholarship D1 guy if things were to, bounce the other way for him. But in the last couple of years of his high school career, kind of had a little unfortunate, events happen. But yeah, I mean, Michigan is a chance to close really strong. I mean, that's usually what they do. Last year in the 22 cycle, they took advantage of a couple of assistant coaches, offensive or head coaches leaving. With Cristobal to Miami and then Venables from Clemson to Oklahoma, which kind of helped them with Clemens and Sab. So. Yeah, I mean, there's the possibilities of how this thing ends is endless. This recruiting class could look a lot different, in December than it does now. Typically, that's usually the case when it comes to recruiting. There's someone out there that we're not talking about that suddenly reemerges. So, we'll see what happens. But Michigan is sitting in a good spot with a couple of these guys. If they can just get a string of commitments from some decently ranked guys, I think it might kind of quell the unrest a little bit. But it's a process. Time will tell.
You can't bet on guys like Jimmy Rolder just spawning and appearing in your recruiting class like last year. A guy who was at this time last year fully involved with baseball, committed to Illinois, and he was committed to Illinois until he and eventually committed to Michigan for football. Now, granted, there was already a telltale sign he was going to do that. However, you think about how unique that close was for Michigan last year, and look at years past. I mean, they closed extremely well in 2016. We all remember the signing of the Stars, which I honestly would not be opposed to that coming back because it was hilarious. And then 2017, when they closed out with so many guys. You think about Donovan Peoples-Jones, who wasn't on signing day, but still was late. And on top of many others, Tariq Black was late that year. And I know we all have thoughts there, but regardless, at the time, a big coup. So again, they are known for this strategy. And I've said it verbatim on Dennis's podcast that they are strategizing the same way that they always have. Don't get me wrong, they're striking out. Like, that's no secret. Like, they wanted Dante Moore, and we know that there's the NIL thing was prominent in that race. But all the same, they wanted Dante Moore. We know that. So they have struck out. But every year, Michigan seems to go and get guys like Cole Cabana early, let him explode later when he's already committed, and then the guys who are already at that high stock, they know they're going to take that long distance approach and not commit until December. And so Michigan plays the long-term game as well. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. When other schools are kind of pressuring kids to join the class, Michigan tends to play contrarian, and sometimes that helps them, sometimes it doesn't. But anybody who thinks this is something out of the ordinary for Michigan, I just beg to differ. I mean, there's certainly some things they should do better on the trail, and they have struck out. However, it's not a whole lot different than what they've done in the past. They're known for closing strong. So with closing strong in mind, with it being our first episode and with this being our last segment, I'm going to put you guys on the spot, ask you a quick question, and want to get your guys' response. So, I mean, it's August 1st, guys. It's early. There's plenty of time. And we've talked, that was literally the whole conversation we just had was how much time Michigan has to revamp this class that's not where it wants to be at 35, according to Rivals. So, tell me what you guys think. And I know that a lot of this is going to be hunch-based. I understand that. Hopefully the people do too. But in your opinion, Zach, I want you to start. Where does this class finish? Maybe don't give me an exact number. Give me like a 3-spot radius, a 3-spot ballpark. Like if I had to choose, I would say in between 15 and 18. And while I make that point, remember where Michigan's 2018 class finished. It was like 24th, I think, 22nd, somewhere in there. And that class included Hutch and Ronnie Bell and Hassan Haskins and how many, a number of other guys. And they were so important to the last year's success. So, again, the whole cliche, not buying into rankings things, it is relevant. It is relevant. So, Zach, I'll let you take it away. Tell me where you think Michigan's 2023 recruiting class will finish this year.
It really depends on how they're able to secure commitments from the guys who they're still going after. I mean, you can look at guys like Jeremiah Love, Aaron Gates, Jacoby Johnson, Xavier McLeod, Mikey Matthews, Spencer Fano. Like the list goes on of how many more guys that are still considering Michigan and are high 3 stars at the lowest. And that's not even including guys like Sid Kaba or, Zach Marshall, who just got offered. Fatigue, who the offensive tackle I mentioned. Like, this isn't going to be – we're not going to sit here on December 15th or whenever National Signing Day is, complaining that they didn't move the needle or they remained at number 35. I fully expect a couple more, at least, they're 13 now, so they can take at least 10 more. I fully expect guys, that all of them that I've mentioned to at least get more of a closer look at this team. And, Michigan is not going to wave the white flag and just saying, Benjamin Hall is our star for this class, even though he's, deserving of his 4-star ranking. I don't mean to pick on Ben, but I just don't expect. I've stated this before on Dennis's podcast, back in February, back in March, and back in April, to stay patient, and I'm going to hold to that, opinion. People may roll their eyes. People may scoff and laugh because they've heard it so many times from me, Josh, or, other notable journalists who cover this, university. But it's the truth. Like, Brandon, you mentioned this, like the long game is such an imperative, aspect in their efforts. And, we're still talking about, we're coming off a month of July where they found, commitments from Fred Moore and Samaj Bridgman and Evan Link. Like, the momentum has not stopped. It's only gotten stronger if you want to put the barbecue into consideration. So, like Josh said, there's guys who are going to blow up. Andrew Paul is an example. Like when I was covering hockey, as a contributor for this site, I remember Brandon's post about Andrew Paul and just his blow up last year. Like he's just a perfect example of someone that could end up on Michigan's radar, and it's going to be in November. Mm-hmm. So there's so much more time. There's so many more factors. There's so many what ifs and unexpecting future news that's just not being talked about. And I know being patient is just not. It's just not a quality. It's not a personality trait for Michigan fans, but it's got to be the case. Remain confident in the fact that all the guys that I have mentioned quickly are still uncommitted and are still rated in the Rivals 250, still have 4 stars and are still climbing the rankings. So there's time. So I know I have yet to answer your question, but
I expected nothing less.
I know. I just ramble. If all things go right, top 15. Texas Tech and Northwestern are still in the top 10 or top 15. And do you really think they're really going to stay in that position, regardless of, whatever they're doing to grab all these 3 stars early? But it's 35 is not going to stay the case. I fully expect Michigan to remain, as elite in the recruiting standings as they've been before.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything Zach said. There's really not much more for me to add there. I mean, he pretty much hit all the key points that I probably would have said myself. If you're talking just from the basis of the current targets now and not factoring in what Michigan could do down the stretch, who comes out of the woodwork, come February, I think Michigan. I think it's realistic to say that they could have a recruiting class north of the 25 range. I think that they would have to be not necessarily on a bit of a heater to close, but they need to close at a better rate that they were over the summer. I mean, that's not to say it was necessarily a bad summer. It wasn't great. It was good. It was a good summer for commitments. There were some disappointments along the way, obviously, but we don't need to rehash old ground. I think somewhere around the 20 range, 15 to 20, I think is fair. They would have to get really, really lucky to go anything above 15. I mean, talking about a top 10 class, I mean, you'd have to really either flip some big guys or do something, because I mean, that's a lot of ground to make up. Not impossible, but that's also selling a little bit of false hope too at the same time, saying, oh yeah, Michigan can land a top 10 class, no problem. I mean, it's not realistic. It can happen, yes. Realistic, no. But I think anywhere between 15 and 20 probably right in their wheelhouse, considering who's left on the board, who they're sitting well for, and who else could pop up out of the woodwork, and who could gain more stars and all that stuff. There's so many moving parts that it's kind of a little too early to really nail it down. But this time of the year, you start to get a good idea of where things are trending overall. So yeah, I think it's realistic. I mean, 15 to 20 range is realistic. I think they could do it. And they have targets out there that can, that they can do it with. I mean, they've got plenty of space. As Zach mentioned, they've got 13 guys in this class. That's nothing. They've got so much more room to add, and they will add. I mean, this is not like we're talking about the end of the road right here. I mean, they're going to get recruitment or commitments, and they'll capitalize on something that we don't know about and we can't foresee right now. So it's going to be an interesting season for sure. I mean, if they're having a solid year again, I think you're really looking at opening up some eyes too. So yeah, I mean, that's obviously another discussion for another day, but I think the opportunity is there to really to finish strong and kind of have a repeat of last year in terms of nailing down some top targets and bringing some talent in.
No doubt, there will be all eyes on how that all finishes up, and you guys can make sure to tune into that on a daily basis on Maize and Blue Review, your Michigan rivals site. So with that being said, that's our first episode of Who's Got Next, which is the recruiting podcast at the Maize and Blue Review. You can always expect to hear this on Tuesdays during the season. It will be weekly. We're going to take a bi-weekly approach in August as our focuses shift, I should say, to fall camp and the football program as a whole. We will be having a football-centric podcast coming out. There are talks about a gambling-centric podcast coming out this year as well. So just be on the lookout for plenty of digital content from a podcast perspective, social media, and of course, the website itself, which gets all of our focus, as do our members who we appreciate. You can use the code. Josh, what's our code?
Kickoff 2022. That's valid. It's valid through August 6th.
Kickoff 2020. Oh, that's my birthday. Wow. All right. Yeah. Kickoff 2022. Get it before I turn 26. anything that anybody who decides to sign up as a member can feel free to donate to I'm Off My Parents' Insurance Fund. I appreciate that because I'm turning 26 on Saturday, which is hilarious because I feel like I've known a lot of you since I was like quite literally a child, like a minor. I was 18. So it's kind of wicked to think about that. But that's besides the point. That's our recruiting show for today. We will talk to you guys in 2 Tuesdays, and then that'll be our last bi-weekly show before this becomes weekly, and we start talking to you guys about where Zach was at on Friday, where I was at on Friday. We'll talk about where Michigan's at with each recruit, and that's where we really get into the heat of things. That's where things become fluid week by week. That's where you can really start discussing who's going where and looking at the trends, et cetera, et cetera. So for Josh, for Zach, and myself, this has been Who's Got Next. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at Michigan Rivals, Instagram, Maize Blue Review, TikTok. What is our username on TikTok, Josh?
It's Maize and Blue Review. I mean, we haven't got our TikTok off the ground yet, but we'll
it's coming.
We'll get that. It's coming. Yeah, we'll have
it's
all
coming.
the latest,
I'm going to become a content creator.
Trends. Yeah.
Davis Mosley is going to teach us all the tips and tricks. Trevor Ritchie is going to add some spice in there too. We've got quite the crew coming at you for the social medias this year, so we're looking forward to it. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We will talk to you guys in a couple of weeks from now. Make sure you smash that like and subscribe button, and have a great day.